this afternoon to be introducing you to an amazing woman called Tracey Wing. Now, Tracey and I are meeting for the very first time today.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. We're going to have a really intimate chat with each other and we've only just met each other. But the way in which I came across Tracey was that I reached out to a couple of friends of mine, and for those who watch the interviews, you know, I'm always looking for like the real patchwork of different people in our communities. And I had a dear friend, Crystal Dean, and I said to her, Crystal, do you know anybody within the LGBTIQ community who might be going under the radar, might be doing some wonderful things? And she mentioned Tracey. Coincidentally, I also reached out to another friend of mine, Pete Smith, and said, do you know anybody who might be, you know, going under the radar and doing something wonderful in the community? And he said, Tracey Wing. And so I may have hounded Tracey slightly by email to get a time with you, to talk to you. Cause
anyone that knows me is now snickering about the under the radar bit though.
Oh really? Wow, we'll talk about that. So Tracey is currently, I just wrote it down, Health Promotions Officer at the Tasmanian Council on AIDS, Hepatitis and Related Diseases.
Yep.
TASCAHRD, is that?
TASCAHRD. It's an easy one because it's so tempting to put the CH together, but they're actually split by an A.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And she's also the Vice President of Tas Pride, and prior to that has had a diverse range of experiences with women's health and public health services. And just when I was asking people about Tracey, the quote that Crystal gave me.
Oh God, did you?
Yeah. Tracey is eternal, patience, endless heart with a cracking wit. She knows what's what.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was really lovely. And for Pete, Pete who referred Tracey through, said Tracey is a very engaged, committed and active member of he's got GLBT community.
Yeah, it all depends on which state you come from.
Yep. From activism to community meetings and mucking in to help run or organise events, you'll find Tracey there. So Tracey, thank you, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Perhaps just a little bit of background on who you are and how you end up here, and people saying such wonderful things about you.
Yeah, good promotions. That's what that's about, and money. I've been out in the community for a long time. These days, I probably thought it was a late bloomer. I came out in my mid-20s when I was still living in Brisbane. Most of my work has been, most of it's been with community organisations, but the bit that was with the public health sector was still very much working in terms of access to health services for vulnerable and marginalised groups and disadvantaged groups. So I guess that's always been the case. Yeah. I've always been keen to be working in that space that's assisting disadvantaged populations, and it's very much from that perspective of the social determinants of health and looking at issues around equity and addressing those and trying to pull down some of those barriers for people.
So TASCAHRD, for those who they may not actually be aware that the organisation exists, because it's quite I think it's a small one.
Yeah, it's only been going for 30 years too, so...
Yeah, it's been around for a while.
No, it's true. A lot of people are not aware of TASCAHRD, and I suppose specifically, especially when you've got an organisation that has such a strong focus, particularly to begin with on HIV, but then also branching out into viral hepatitis. Unless it's something that is impacting you or someone you know, it's just not something that you're necessarily going to be aware of and go looking for. And of course, that's one of the things that we're trying to do. We all our work is very much has that constant focus of trying to reduce the stigma and discrimination that people living with a bloodborne virus often do experience. And so raising awareness about the issues in the general community is one of our tasks, and I admit that it's often difficult to get them to pay attention because they just go, at best they might just go, well, that doesn't affect me. Yeah. At worst, of course, they are buying into some of that stigma and discrimination and going, well, that's groups of people that I don't like for some reason or another, or that this is what I've heard about and I don't want to know. Yeah. So it's a difficult task at times, and inevitably, as we know, that impact on the populations we're dealing with is that they will take that stigma and discrimination on themselves. They've often experienced a lot of it, so people suffer health impacts from that, a range of impacts from that sort of stuff. And so working to support them to increase their capacity to be peer educators, to be peer supports, but also just to increase their resilience and their ability to cope and manage in what is sometimes a very judgmental world.
Yes.
So yeah.
So you mentioned that you came out in your 20s?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe a little bit about that experience for you. Was it you hear stories of people who find it a very intense emotional time with family or own experiences.
The only intense thing about it for me was my sister, because she got really cross that I didn't actually come to her and tell her, because she'd already figured it out. In fact, everyone had figured it out. And sort of I just did I just figured you already knew. And she'd go, well, I did. But yeah, she was worried that I thought that she'd take it badly, which I just hadn't really got around to telling her. So yeah, it was a relatively easy thing for me. In lots of ways, it was, it wasn't like an enormous burden had lifted off my shoulders, but I certainly felt afterwards that, there was a part of myself that I hadn't, tried to acknowledge or look at, and now that I had, and I had a context for it and words to describe it, and knew other people that were the same, it was just
And so, has your journey been a fairly positive one?
Yeah, definitely. Which I think is one of the things that has really assisted me with working with and supporting other people who are less fortunate in that regard. And inevitably, when we're talking about less fortunate, it's not about them. It's as I always say to people, you're not getting a hard time because you're gay. You're getting a hard time because people are homophobic, and it's a very different thing.
Openly gay and being female. Females tend to, I think, at the best of times, give stories of feeling discriminated against in a workplace or having challenges. Have you ever felt that being female and gay as well is like a double whammy, so to speak?
Look, it certainly can be. I would say less so for me, but because of the person that I am, which is certainly someone who comes across, I know, as being quite confident most of the time and has been very out. They're valuable lessons. They've taught me that if you're out, you get in first. They already know. There's nothing for them to wonder about. But not everyone has the confidence or even the safety to do that. If I was working in very different workspaces, and my workplaces have either involved, like when I was at Hobart Women's, which is now Women's Health Tasmania. When I was at Hobart Women's Health Centre, my title was the Sexuality and Gender Health Worker. I was known as a professional lesbian.
Okay.
And it's always been the case. So and even with, as I said, with my work in the public health sector with population health, the only double whammy that caused was that while I was there, we actually didn't have someone in the position of LGBTIQ health policy, and so I was always, or often, the go-to. So it's like, really, there's no one else you can ask, because there were other people, LGBTI people that were working there better. So for me, no, but I've certainly had the opportunity to reflect on that, knowing it's because I'm confident, because I was able and felt safe, to be out from the start. It's just not the case for too many people still. There's awful experiences in other workplaces, experiences with family or just in general, which mean that they don't feel safe, with good reason, don't feel safe to enter a new workplace, and as while you're getting to know everyone, talking about that, the trouble is, by not bringing it up right away, it just makes it harder to do it later. In my opinion, I think it is better to do it up front.
It almost sounds like the sort of advice you might give somebody if they were comfortable with what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, absolutely. If
just get out and say it.
While it's not fair that others might be homophobic or transphobic or anything like that, there's less chance of you being victimised by their behaviour, if you take a strong stand on it to go, you can't victimise me about it because I'm telling you.
when you're thinking about leadership, what are you thinking about?
Look, especially since I've been in Tasmania, it often really is about putting your hand up and saying, yes, I'll do that. And that might mean being sometimes a public face of things, admittedly. But I'm constantly surprised about how difficult it is, especially if you're talking about LGBTIQ stuff down here. There is a real reluctance for people to talk about it, and it's not just a lack of confidence, it's just struggling to be able to take that step, and that's fine. I mean, it's not like you need a lot of people that will be a public face of an issue or a campaign or anything. But even just in general, being prepared to put yourself out there, it's hard sometimes to find people to do it. So it was necessity, if anything else. I recently went to a gig at the Deck. It was Rusciano, the comedian, singer, all that sort of stuff.
I would love to have seen her.
Oh, she was fantastic. I barely knew her. I hadn't watched the show and stuff, but a friend bought tickets. And we were all sitting there, and because I wasn't aware of this, but because when she was on, I think it was Australian Idol, she scraped through a few rounds because a whole lot of lesbians loved her and voted for her. And so she was acknowledging that, saying thank you, and she goes, are there any lesbians in the audience? There's about 5,000 people there, and there's lots of lesbians. We've seen them all out in the foyer getting drinks. So she goes, are there any lesbians there? And I just go, and then I look around. Not one person. And she's
like, I know you're here.
And she makes a joke, oh, there's just one here. Well, there's one lesbian in Hobart. No, other than my partner puts a hand up and she goes, oh, I should hope so, But that was it. And that is typical of me. Not that I'm saying that's good, because sometimes it gets me into trouble. And sometimes I really overtax myself and have spread myself too thin with stuff. But you have to put your hand up sometimes, at least sometimes. Yes, and I could take this as a lesson for myself, be sensible and don't spread yourself too thin, but until you start putting your hand up for stuff, at least some stuff, that drives you and that you're passionate about, you're probably going to have that sitting there going to waste, so yeah.
I mean, you mentioned before about, when I said to you about why were you sitting at the front, I guess, and you said about it was a good way to engage, but clearly there's a passion there.
Yeah. And it's funny, I'm because I didn't have a particularly difficult time in that regard in terms of my coming out and my sexuality. I guess it's just because in that journey I've met lots that do, and it just seems so unfair and ridiculous. We've progressed a lot in terms of our awareness and knowledge of things, or at least some of us. And so it seems really weird when you're reminded that there's a great big unwashed world out there that doesn't necessarily see things that way, or just has bought into a stereotyped view of things, of people and issues. And like all discrimination, it encourages them to forget that we're talking about human beings.
Yeah.
And we're talking about amazing people with amazing stories that have every possibility of being able to contribute as fully and as wonderfully as everyone else, but sometimes our society misses out on that because of those dumb stereotypes and assumptions.
Yeah. The stereotype of dancing, drag queens, rainbow flags, glitter, disco balls. Is that okay? Everyone's happy?
It's not a stereotype if that's what you are. And if you're that, you're fabulous. Of course it's not a helpful stereotype if you're projecting it onto someone who it doesn't fit. But there are some fabulous dancing drag queen types that throw glitter around on the dance floor, and everyone loves that.
Them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just a part of our incredible fabric, of our society. Would you really want to get rid of that colour and vibrance?
No.
I hope not.
No. I think sometimes, as I sort of tripped over my words at the start, the language gets confusing at times because you're not sure, because I've got friends and people I work with, and it's just it is what it is. Love is love. But sometimes I must admit, I personally get a bit nervous about, can I call you gay? Is that going to offend? Like, I don't want to offend anybody. Or are you allowed to say transgender? Like, because you don't want to use terms that people will just take offence to without actually realising, because it's not your intention.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, not surprisingly, our communities have pretty tough skins, thick skins, I should say. And if you're not sure about how to address someone, it's really okay to ask. And they often appreciate that, because it means you're thinking about it and you don't want to cause offence. There are certain terms that, and generally at the moment, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex and queer are being used very broadly, but they still won't suit some people. And I invite people to say so, I can get it wrong sometimes too.
It's actually somebody early today that I spoke to. I was talking to her about talking with people with disability and being a little unsure how to interact or what to call them, and she made a lovely comment about, it doesn't matter, it's in the tone of your voice.
No, of course.
I think you just said that though, like in how genuine you are. Just ask, just ask, genuinely ask, don't, and people will know that it's coming from a genuine place of uncertainty.
Exactly. And respect.
And respect too.
And in the end, that is just, I guess that's the word that encompasses anything. It's about respect, particularly when it's respecting difference, because it's difference that makes people unsure and uncomfortable, especially when there's not much knowledge about what that difference entails. And as long as you're coming from a respectful place, you'll muddle through.
Muddle through.
I knew some bad words about people like me, what turned out to be people like me.
So dyke would be one of them, dyke.
Yeah, well, that at the time, I mean, I'm going to be 50 next year. So at the time, in high school, for instance, I think dyke was hardly ever used, because it was such a bad word. You just wouldn't say that about someone.
Whereas now it seems like they can't have dykes on bikes.
Exactly. It's another word that's been reclaimed.
Yeah.
But I still know plenty of women who either call themselves lesbians or gay women who can't stand the word dyke. Tend to be older women, probably because they've had it used as a weapon against them so much. So I really understand that. Younger women don't like it much either, I might add though. Again, it's funny. It's a funny one. I think it's a fabulous word. Dyke.
The other one that, particularly the last couple of years, that is so gay.
Oh yeah. I mean, organisations and working with the LGBTIQ communities have done a lot of work trying to get people to stop saying that. And it's always the same, but I wasn't talking about you. I didn't mean it like that. It's like, you are, and you did. Even if it wasn't intentional.
Yes.
And, especially young people, if you give them the space to actually consider that, they'll get it. But it became such a habitual, part of the language. It still is. And I guess I would advise people to try not to take it personally, because it actually genuinely is not meant personally. But challenge it by all means and say, I know you're not meaning it personally, but how do you know who else can hear it? Are you saying it at home? Are you sure about what the sexuality will be of your younger siblings in the future? Because right now they're hearing that being gay is bad. It's the equivalent of stupid or not good enough or ugly or useless,
I remember when I was growing up, they reissued the naughty books.
Yep.
They completely reissued, anyone in my age would remember, they completely reissued the entire series of naughty books because they were worried about the use of those terms, encouraging, and they changed the storylines so that Naughty wasn't having sleepovers at, what was his name? Big Ears. Yeah, and so that's very unfortunate, and a little bit what's the word, overkill in some respects, but
the absolute lowlights for me in terms of overkill when they renamed fags fads.
Yes.
And fairy penguins to little penguins.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, the people that were most against them changing the name fairy penguins were gay men. They were going, you what? We love fairy penguins.
I didn't realise they changed. I knew they changed the fags to fads. Is there anything else in regards to language that is comes to mind?
nothing specific, because language can, no matter what the word is, woman, can be used as a weapon or as a means of insulting or putting someone down. It's often not about the words, it's about your respect and whether you've checked in to see what words are okay.
Yeah. Could you explain the picture?
Yeah, the picture behind me, which you can't see very well, is of Andrew Shaw. We have a foundation that's auspiced by TASCAHRD called the Andrew Shaw Foundation, and it started in the 80s. Andrew Shaw was actually the first man who died from AIDS in Tasmania, because back then there weren't treatments, and so people who unfortunately acquired HIV inevitably went on to develop AIDS and die. And his parents approached TASCAHRD and wanted to start a foundation and to remember him by. It's not funded by government or anything, it's funded solely by donations, most of which we collect on World AIDS Day, which is the 1st of December. If you see someone with a red cup. Yeah. And it provides financial assistance to people living with HIV in Tasmania.
How do you hope to be remembered?
They'll allow my other talk. No. No, I don't know if I even need to feel particularly remembered. I'm sure the people that know me well will remember me as someone who, was lots of fun, but was also there when they needed them, and fought really hard for everyone to be able to be as fortunate, I guess, if you like, as I am.
Just out of curiosity, do you have like a mantra, or do you have a saying that you think to yourself regularly, or perhaps in times of, not crisis, but...
Only ones that involve profanity.
Oh, really? I've never had to use the bleep option yet. We can always try, although